The Gateway brings you the day's news from the St. Louis region and across Missouri. It also includes stories from the Illinois side of the river and our Metro East reporter, Will Bauer.
In Alton, in Belleville, in East St. Louis, in Edwardsville, in Cahokia Heights, at Scott Air Force Base, I'm Will Bauer. St. Louis Public Radio.
Listen to reports from Will and all of our journalists weekdays on The Gateway, on the STLPR app, and wherever you get podcasts.
9, 8,
7,
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think that is fair to
As I
say.
hands to kiss and babies to shake. But
I think my record speaks for itself.
That's a really good question.
Hello and welcome to the Politically Speaking podcast. I'm your host, Jason Rosenbaum with St. Louis Public Radio. Joining me in studio in St. Louis is
Joe Mannies.
And joining us from his office in Washington, D.C., the first time we've ever interviewed somebody on this show from another place besides Missouri.
We have had Senator McCaskill here, just to be clear.
But our guest today is
Emanuel Cleaver from Missouri, from the 5th District.
Thank you very much for being on our show. It's an honor to talk with somebody of your stature. You have a street named after you in Kansas City, and you've had a long tenure in municipal and federal politics. So we're thrilled to have you on the show today. But before we get into you as a person, just tell us a little bit about your district and kind of the area it encompasses.
Well, usually when people hear about my district in Missouri, they're confused because the natural assumption of an African American in Congress is that he or she represents a majority-minority district. I was mayor of Kansas City, which was at the time 24% African American. My congressional district is about 23% African American, about 5% Latino. It is Kansas City, Missouri, the metropolitan area almost. It takes in Independence, Missouri, and Raytown and Grandview, some of the suburban areas, and then it begins to move toward the east, and this is a new part of my district. It was once represented by one of my closest friends. I refer to him as my older brother, Ike Skelton. That's Saline and Lafayette counties. The cities that people may be more familiar with than the name of the county would be Concordia or Marshall or Richmond or Higginsville, Odessa, Sweet Springs, Excelsior Springs, Slater, which is about 14 miles from Marshall, and Richmond. I think I mentioned it. So I have a very urban district, and then a very, very, very rural district, and that's.
I was going to say you actually you represent the place where Jim the Wonder Dog in Marshall, Missouri.
That's right.
Located.
That's right.
I love Jim the
absolutely
Wonder
right.
Dog. I have to ask because your district during redistricting was, I don't want to say it was controversial, but it was probably certainly a situation where you got a lot of new territory that you didn't have before that was decidedly rural. I mean, after redistricting was over and you had to represent this area, what was kind of your reaction to getting this pretty radically different district as far as, rural, suburban, and urban?
Well, in many ways, I was very pleased. In some ways, I resented the redistricting because from the outside, it looked like a plan to place me in harm's way politically. But what people probably didn't know is that I was born and raised in Texas. Both of my paternal and my maternal grandfathers were farmers, and so I grew up picking cotton, helping my grandpa chop in the cornfields. We didn't have them, but my grandparents had pigs, chickens, so we were living the life. I didn't even know that we were poor until I was about 12. Somebody told me. because we had food all the time and fresh food. And I can remember being stunned the first time I had margarine. And I thought, what is this? Who did this? Because I grew up eating, pure butter that I helped churn. So representing a rural area really in many ways was a return home.
Yeah. So how did you end up getting involved both just in politics in general? I know you were a councilman for many years in Kansas City. You became the first African-American mayor, and then you were elected to Congress in 2004. What kind of prompted you to get into politics in the first place?
Well, I became involved in my college days in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference at the time that Martin Luther King was the president. Most people say Martin Luther King was the leader of the Civil Rights Movement, which is not accurate. He was the head of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and there were about 5 other organizations headed by other people that formed the movement. And I became involved in the organization headed by Dr. King, Ralph Abernathy, Joe Lowry, C.K. Steele, Fred Shuttlesworth, and eventually was asked by Ralph Abernathy after Dr. King's death if I would start a chapter of the SCLC in Kansas City where I was moving. I was starting to work at Bendix, or what's known today as Honeywell, and so I did start the chapter. I eventually resigned from Honeywell and went to seminary, got a Master's of Divinity, and I will never forget in 1977 we had a horrible flood in Kansas City. 25 people drowned, including one friend of mine, Harold Thornton, who was a Presbyterian minister, and most of the people drowned right off the Country Club Plaza, which for people in the St. Louis area it's maybe like the Westport area in St. Louis or Georgetown in D.C. And we had a creek that ran through the plaza that caused the flooding, and I can remember sitting around with a group of my friends, and I was saying, this is absolutely crazy. Everybody knows that the waters come out of Brush Creek every time it rains. It was just going to be a matter of time before people were killed. And I said, somebody needs to put a plan together and work on stopping this. And a guy named Bill Johnson, who I was talking with, said, well, you're somebody. And it shut me up. And I thought, well, okay. So I decided, well, at the next municipal election, I think I'll run. I ran for the city council and won the seat, and served on city council 12 years, and then ran for mayor. I never forgot my commitment that I made to that small group of people, one evening in my home, and so I was eventually able to put together a major capital improvement plan, which included rebuilding and beautifying what's called Brush Creek. And for anybody who's been on the plaza, you can see it's a gorgeous waterway now. So that kind of got me started in politics. And after I served in municipal government in Kansas City, I had a 3-year program on NPR in Kansas City, KCUR, and then I resigned when I ran for the House of Representatives. So I've been here 10 years now.
Now, as many of our listeners may not know, you are a pastor, and aside from the fact that perhaps because of that, you're often the best speaker at the Democratic events I've covered. From being a pastor, how has that contributed or affected your approach toward issues in Congress?
Well, first of all, I think as a pastor, there's some things that I just absolutely can't do, and I think it has helped me. For example, many of the members will go to the club every night, the Democratic Club. I will go down periodically to have dinner, but I'm not sure that it's helpful for me and what Methodist ministers and probably most ministers would like to present as as who they are and what they stand for. So I don't hang out. I never said anything to any of the members about language, but I'll get at least 2 or 3 times a day, sometimes more, people saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize, I shouldn't have said that." They will use some very colorful language in the political world. I'm sure
Is that why you referred to that a bill once as a Satan-flavored sandwich instead of something with profanity in it, by the way?
Yes, I mean, I referred to the sequestration bill as a sugar-coated Satan sandwich, and it rolled off my tongue almost without me thinking. Now there are some other ways to have said that, but I made that statement, and I didn't say the people were Satan who did the bill, or I never attacked individuals, but it was a bad bill, and that was the ugliest I could think of at the moment when the reporter asked me a question.
Now, a few years ago, during the height of the Tea Party movement, you made the national news when it appeared from a video that someone had spit on you. Did that reflect or alter your approach toward things over the next few years during the height of some of the combative activity in the House?
Well, it caused me not to walk outside in between votes. Capitol Hill, you can come on Capitol Hill and you can go everywhere if you're a member, from the office building to the Library of Congress, over to the Capitol, to the Visitor Center, over to the Senate side, which is probably in city blocks, would probably 3 or 4 blocks away, all underground, without going outside. And so I made a decision I was going to go in the tunnel. One of the things I think, my dad has said many times when he saw it on TV, and some of his friends, his buddies were watching, and he teared up because he said had he been there, it would have turned out really ugly. So I think it would be disingenuous of me to say that I was not angry, but I think that we can't afford to show ourselves. I will remember the next day, Michelle Bachmann walked up to me. I will never forget it. She walked up to me coming from the chamber where we had voted, and she just came up to me and said, "Look, I'm not supporting that kind of thing." She said, "I didn't like that." Now, I think most people would probably not attribute things like that to the controversial Miss Bachmann. So, I've tried to do things that would cause the people here to work with me in a manner that they, somebody they trust, somebody not trying to get headlines or somebody who's going to do name calling. And it has worked for me. I mean, I was able to get in a Republican Congress something done that nobody believed could be done, which was to get the Liberty Memorial in Kansas City designated as the National World War I Memorial and Museum, because there is no World War I monument in Washington. There's a monument to every war except World War I, as strange as that may sound to your listeners. So we do have the Liberty Memorial in Kansas City, which is a very majestic cone rising out of the ground on the hill across from Union Station. And so I was able to get that bill approved both in the House and Senate, and the President, of course, signed it. And I think one of the reasons that we were able to get that done is, working with people and not being nasty and trying to, understand people's positions on things, even if I disagree extremely strongly with them. And so I think that it has been an experience for me, and probably an experience for some others as well.
Yeah. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit to talk about Ferguson. And even though Ferguson is 250 miles away from Kansas City. I feel like you have a unique perspective on this because you were a longtime municipal official. You've been to Ferguson multiple
Many
times. And I just want to ask very plainly, what have you thought of the last few months and how it's played out here? And from your experience leading a major city, what do you think could have been done differently on all levels of government that were done incorrectly in your view?
Well, I started going to Ferguson about 4 years ago when I made the decision that I was going to step down as pastor of the St. James United Methodist Church, which I had led for 37 years. The church had grown significantly and it was healthy. And so I went to the bishop, Robert Schnese, whose office is in Columbia, and asked, if I could step down. He told me, no, why don't you just, go on a sabbatical, get excited again and come back. And I said, no, I'm spending too much time away from the church and so forth. Anyway, make a long story short, he eventually said, okay, I want you to be a special assistant to work with troubled churches. So one of the churches I began to work with was a church in Ferguson, St. John United Methodist Church, which is now the Wellspring United Methodist Church, which I helped get all of that changed over, and so I was recommended the pastor, Reverend Willis Johnson, who actually had grown up in our church, gone out and got his doctorate in theology. So I was going in and out, became very familiar with Ferguson, and then when the tragedy hit, I immediately went down, primarily to see what was going on with our church and to make sure that if there were problems there, that I offered as much support as I could for Reverend Johnson. And I went down, and when I saw what was going on, the first night I went down there was the night the MRAPs were rolling down the street. And, there's tear gas, and it looked like a movie, or it looked more like Fallujah than Ferguson. And so I thought, this is something that has gotten out of control. And I came to the conclusion much earlier that Ferguson was a little community that the civil rights movement bypassed. And they're good and decent people, but they were, and to some degree they still are, living decades in the past. Here's the problem. In 2013, there were 33,000 warrants issued in Ferguson, police warrants, and the population is 21,000. And wrap yourself around that. 33,000 warrants in a town of 21,000. That means everybody in the town, at least statistically, could have gotten a warrant on them, and a few for the next few towns over, people in the next few towns over. So, and if you have a police force where only a few of the 54 police officers actually live in Ferguson, it also suggests that instead of a police force, it's almost like an army patrolling an occupied territory. And that's how many of the people saw the police. And so it was not a very pleasant community, and I thank God and a lot of good people, black and white, who are trying desperately to turn Ferguson around.
Yeah. Do you think another issue, and this might be a poignant one for you, was just the lack of minority representation in government? Because there was recently an election there where 2 African Americans won. Even though the city is 2/3 African American, it's the first time the council has had 3 African Americans on it. Do you think that just from an institutional perception standpoint that maybe the African American population in Ferguson didn't feel like they had a foothold or a voice in city government?
Well, they would say it outright. I mean, I was down in Ferguson trying to register voters. I was there the weekend before the election, involved in a political boot camp that we ran out of the Wellspring United Methodist Church, trying to make sure that we got the number of voters up from the previous election. And if you start talking with people in Ferguson, they will say, this doesn't matter, or they're going to cheat us on the election, or they would say, if I go to vote, they already have my name in a computer for some kind of traffic stop, but if I go and vote, then I'm going to be put on a jury, and they'll know where I live and where I work. I mean, the many in the black population in Ferguson were simply paranoid, and the one thing that I hope people really understand is that the people in Ferguson, African Americans in particular, believed that was not their government. So it was going to be infinitely more difficult to convince people to run for public office for a political body that they did not see as not only representative of them, but that they saw it as alien or antithetical to the things they wanted. So it was not a small undertaking to get people registered to vote or to come out to vote. And frankly, we were successful. I left town Sunday night before the Tuesday election, just almost praying that we had a reasonable turnout, because I feared if we did not, that it would be another decade before we could get the people in Ferguson to the point where they thought, yes, we can make a change. And now I think they believe it when half the city council is black.
Yes, I covered that election, and the turnout in Ferguson, just for our listeners, was well over twice what it was in other parts of the county. So from that standpoint, you did make a difference. My question is, though, the election and the aftermath and everything, are there any broader lessons beyond Ferguson that you think either other members of Congress or other officials in Missouri should heed?
Yes, that there are a number of messages. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, I was born and raised just outside of downtown Dallas, Texas. And when I grew up, with my mother, father, and three sisters and I would ride in that Oldsmobile 88, and we'd go through a little town called Saginaw, Texas, just outside of Dallas. And my mother would always tell my father, honey, slow down. And my father would be driving, 20 miles per hour, and he'd slow down to 5, because Saginaw had a reputation for traffic tickets, giving traffic tickets. That's how they maintained their municipal operation. So whenever you have that kind of contact between the police and the public, you cannot expect a lot of good things to happen. And other cities, almost every state in the union, people can tell you about a little town where there's an industry called taxation by citation, and we have that in Ferguson, and a lot of cities now can just thank their lucky stars that they haven't had conflicts similarly. But the problem is that they may not have had that large a minority population. So the other thing is that it has taught us that the military equipment that we've been giving here in Washington from Homeland Security, the Department of Defense, and the Justice Department, going to towns and police organizations all over the state, that the thought that you could intimidate the public by rolling this heavy-duty military equipment down the main street of an American city is just not going to work. It's not going to happen. I mean, most people rebel and recoil against that. Black, white, poor, it doesn't matter. The reaction to what people saw on television was, I liken to what people saw when John Lewis, Martin Luther King, and others marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. and that is when the people turned on Huntley Brinkley News or Walter Cronkite and saw Bull Connor and his men beating civil rights marchers, peaceful marchers. The nation recoiled. The nation was just angry, and that helped create the atmosphere for the passage of the Voting Rights Act. And I think when the American public turned on their television sets in their homes and saw this heavy-duty military equipment rolling down the streets of an American city, they came to the conclusion quickly, this is just not what we should tolerate in this country. And
So
I think that people got that message.
So I wanted to you actually transitioned really nicely into our next topic, that you've actually proposed legislation that aims at curtailing some of those towns you just talked about. From what I've read before, it would make it a civil rights violation to basically go after somebody criminally or civilly in a traffic offense solely for revenue. Is that an accurate description of what you were trying to do there, and what are you hoping to accomplish by it?
Yes, that is an accurate description. It is a civil rights violation when people are unconstitutionally stopped for the purpose of raising revenue. It's policing for profits that I think is unconstitutional in this country, and the bill will deny communities that are found guilty of policing for profit. And we can tell so if they earn more than 30% of their municipal budget from traffic tickets, it will catch the attention of the United States Justice Department. If they are found to be violating this law, they can lose their burn grant. Now, for most people, that doesn't mean much, but almost every law enforcement office in the United States receives money from the Justice Department through what is called a burn grant. Some kind of policing operation is funded in almost every community through the burn grant. So municipalities will risk losing those dollars if they should make the decision, as Ferguson made. It was their decision had a great deal of intentionality, and all you had to do is read the report from the Justice Department where they had emails actually saying, "Good job" to the police chief from the city manager. You raised $2.5 million, and that's a new record.
But one of the things I wanted to ask is, there has been on a state level kind of efforts to restrict the amount of revenue that can get from traffic tickets. And one of the things that I've noticed is some of the biggest opponents to this are some African American legislators and mayors. I'm going to play you a clip from Clem Smith, who is a state representative from Belle to Village Hills, which is in St. Louis County, when he's responding to efforts to curtail the amount of revenue cities can get from traffic tickets.
Talking with the cities that I represent, there wasn't a lot of discussion about, hey, what would be a good percentage? How can we do this? And from that, then there's pushback from my area, and I've got concern with that too.
Basically, what he's saying is a lot of the mayors that are predominantly African American towns, and many of these mayors are African American themselves, feel that efforts like this are going to basically wipe these communities out of existence. Have you kind of heard that those? I know that maybe that's not a response to your bill in particular, but it is a response to efforts to kind of crack down on some of these cities. Have you kind of heard these argumentations, and if so, like, what's your response to them?
Yes, I have heard those responses. The Missouri General Assembly is considering such legislation that would knock it down to 10%. And in speaking to members of the General Assembly, I've been told that it is going to be approved and the governor is going to sign it. I used to be the president of the National Conference of Black Mayors, and most of the black mayors, 420 at the time when I was president, are from small towns like those around St. Louis, and the mayors in those small towns were part of the organization when I led it back in the 1990s. And I understand what they're saying. Here's the problem. Look, you're asking for trouble when you do this, when you're stopping people to raise money. And one of the things that I suggest to mayors who are saying, no, we got to keep giving these traffic tickets is this. Look, if you can't function without giving traffic tickets, maybe it's time now for you to enter into some kind of relationship with a county police force where, for example, if Ferguson can't function, then they need to pay a certain amount of tax dollars that would allow the St. Louis County Police to take over the operation of Ferguson. And whether libertarians are jumping on this, as soon as I introduced this bill, Rand Paul called me and said, "Hey, I want to introduce the same bill over on the Senate side." And I'm meeting with Speaker Boehner next week, to go over the bills. And it's my hope that in the next couple of weeks, it'll be on the floor of the House. And if it gets over to the Senate, I'm pretty much assured that it's going to pass there.
Yeah,
and
Rand
so
Paul
the mayors.
I was going to say Rand Paul and Emanuel Cleaver are two political figures you probably didn't expect to work together on something. But you're right. The libertarians are very big on this type of thing, and some conservative Republicans as well. So
Yeah, the Koch brothers, for example, are supporting it, and the Heritage Foundation, super conservative. Now, I don't use the word progressive. I'm a liberal, and because I don't allow people to define that word for me. So we're working together, and so the mayors had better take a look at the people who are coming together on this. This is not, some kind of right-wing plot to damage small cities. This is the wave of the future, and I think what we've got to preach here in Washington is that small towns are going to have to figure out ways in which they can work together, form consortiums, and work together to save money. Efficiency is going to be the new order of the day, and that's just the way it is. It's the day is over when you can police for profit, and Ferguson, I think, is taking the right step. And just think about this: Ferguson is not much larger than Capitol Hill, which means that you could almost have half of your police force involved in community policing, which means they ride around on bicycles and walk. And when you do that, you get a chance to know people. You don't even need a larger police department. And you see a guy walking in the street. You've been in this community for years. You say, "Michael, get out of the street. Come on, you shouldn't be in the middle of the street." I mean, that's the kind of policing we're going to have in the future.
So are you advocating that Ferguson get rid of its police force and go with St. Louis County, or just change how its police force operates?
I do just need to add for context, none of the city council members, including some of them that won, support that. So, is that going to be a challenge to actually have that happen?
No. And I know two of the new city council, I know two of the council members. Councilman James was there previously, but look, this is just the way it's going to be, and we've got to make adjustments. They're going to have to make adjustments. I understand that it's difficult, but if you think about this, how awful it is that we would be having a debate in 2015 about whether or not we can try to run a municipal government on the basis of how many traffic tickets we can give. It's just not right. It's not right. And I think we're going to have some changes, some dramatic changes. And when you look at the people who are pushing it, they're from all walks of life. And if you're not in municipal government, you're probably going to be pretty much on my side.
Yeah, most likely. So we only have a few minutes left. I just wanted to go into politics a little bit. Hillary Clinton announced for president, I guess a couple of weeks ago. You were a prominent supporter of her 2008 run. I'm going to go out on a limb and say in 2016, are you getting back on the Hillary Clinton presidential bandwagon?
Yeah, you went way out on a limb. So I will, in all likelihood, be involved heavily in the Clinton campaign. The campaign manager, Mr. Moot, called me earlier this week to just say the secretary had asked me to reach out to you and tell you that she's going to catch up with you. She wants you to be deeply involved in the campaign, and I intend to do that. When you think that we had a capable and qualified woman who ran India 3 decades ago. We've had Margaret Thatcher in England. I think we've got to start thinking about making the presidency available to anyone who has the leadership skills and the capacity, and Hillary Clinton does. So I'm going to support her very strongly. I think that she is going to be a stronger candidate because she lost 6 years ago to Barack Obama. And I think if you look at her campaign, that's what she's doing, the things now that she failed to do 6 years ago.
Now, you were very active, very, very prominent in her husband's campaigns for president back in the 90s. And, of course, at that point, Missouri was a battleground state. Bill Clinton actually was the last Democrat to carry Missouri. Do you think that she has a chance of carrying Missouri in 2016? Or I've had some officials on both sides tell me that they don't see Missouri as a battleground state and that it will likely end up as a Republican, that the Republicans will carry it regardless who the nominee is. I'm interested in your take on that.
Well, if you look at all of the polls, the state of Missouri is 50-50, which is why it's been considered a bellwether state. It's 50-50. It can go any way. All you have to do is look at the state offices. So you got a Democratic governor, you got a Democratic secretary of state, on down the line, treasurer. And so, the state is not a hard red or a hard blue state. And I think President Clinton had has had an appeal to the people in rural Missouri, and I think Secretary Clinton will have that same appeal. And that is, they're not going to come across as some blazing liberal. And in fact, Secretary Clinton is a little more hawkish than am I on military issues. But you're not going to find a perfect candidate. I think that, and I said this to the campaign manager in the phone call earlier, I think we have a chance to take Missouri because I think that both Hillary Clinton and her husband, who won it previously, are people who are not seen as Barack Obama is seen in Missouri. There are portions of my congressional district that the president's approval rating was down in the 20s. So I don't think you can find that kind of number on Hillary Clinton. This is going to be a battle for Missouri, and I think Hillary Clinton will win it.
It'll be an interesting thing to watch because that's the sort of thing that can bleed over into other races as well. But Congressman, we were just delighted that we were able to have you on our show from D.C. Thank you so much. To close us out, you can find all of our stories at stlpublicradio.org. You can follow me on Twitter at @JRosenbaum. You can follow Joe at Twitter at
@JMannies. That's JMannies.
And Congressman, are you on Twitter as well? I believe it's Rep Cleaver, if I'm not mistaken. Is
yes.
that right? Yes.
Rep Cleaver.
Thank you very much again, and we'll be back next week. And until then, so long.
So long.
If you have a smart speaker, you have access to the entire world of NPR and St. Louis Public Radio. All the latest news and all the captivating stories. Activate our voices with yours by telling your smart speaker to play St. Louis Public Radio.